just to kind of tie up Siobhan's last question regarding the role of the accountant, I think, or the role of the auditor, I think it can relate to both, like in terms of this increase in technology and this automation, because you see it not only happening with audits, but also internally within firms, and what is the role of the internal accountants. And personally, the last company that I was in, I kind of went through a lot of the internal transitions where they were automating a lot of their journal entries and all their processes. And I saw my role transition more as kind of the accounting, finance, information source for the programmers to set up these programs internally. So I kind of see that maybe being the future, because you can't specialize in everything. So I think there still is a need for accountants who have this regulatory knowledge and know how to apply the rules, and you need them to kind of interact with those specialists who are good at setting up the data the way it needs to be running. So a lot of my experience in that job was interacting back and forth with programmers and seeing what they did and seeing how that affected the accounting side. So I think that's kind of where I see at least the future roles. I don't think the role of accounting is going to be dismissed altogether, but I do see more specialty type roles between different groups. And then just a few things I wanted to just expand upon. Siobhan mentioned that capturing the information that, with high technology, this data is readily available. And I just wanted to point out for this second bullet point in terms of the transaction monitoring involved. And the paper mentions both continuous monitoring or continuous reprocessing via mirror systems, with the monitoring probably being more likely used. And I just wanted to note that I'm not sure where the stage is now in terms of the audit process of how much of this is going on, but the paper does mention in terms of moving towards a broader scope of assurance, having these systems already starting to run on the audit side, you can actually piggyback off of them to use this technology already in place for the broader assurance products. And then just to expand upon, Siobhan discussed that there's an argument that you need to have a demand. And some of the other important points I thought the paper pointed out was that already companies make a large number of selective disclosures outside of the financial statements. So again, there is this demand outside of the audit. And then it also mentioned, just due to this globalization of supply chains, there's an increase in the number of stakeholders, which also will increase demand. And also a lot of new transactions occurring, such as IT outsourcing, where you might need certain assurance for these new types of relationships being formed. And then I just wanted to go a little more into, in terms of concerns with adoption of assurance, focus more on the independence aspect of it. And two of the things that I just wanted to touch upon a little more are, we mentioned who's going to pay for the services, but there's also mention of the actual absorption of the initial startup costs and implementing that initial infrastructure. And there's a question brought up in the paper of whether the assurer or the assuree is going to be paying for these and how that has implications on independence. And I'm going to discuss that in a little bit. And also this idea of a limited choice of assurance provider. And it's mentioned that there'll likely only be one provider within a given enterprise to provide this assurance. And this is due to that need to spread the cost over multiple users. If you had 3 different assurers within a company, then those initial setup costs might become more expensive. And also, this idea of high setup costs inhibits switching. And again, I see some implications on independence there in terms of the inability for rotation of assurers, which we already see in financial statement audits, the idea of at least partner rotation. So again, I think this is a great overview of continuous assurance and the different factors contributing to the adoption. And I just wanted to focus on one item that maybe we could discuss, which is, I think it gives ideas for further research, but it leaves open the door for this idea of independence and how continuous assurance will affect independence. And there's a line in the paper that mentions if the assuree absorbs the startup costs, but the technology is customized for a specific assurer, the paper notes that this would enhance independence. And I think it's referring more to the assuree absorbing the startup cost instead of the assurer, who in that case would be closely involved with the internal transactions and setup of the company's system. So I can see from that perspective how independence might be enhanced, but at the same time, this idea of the assuree customized, even if they're taking on the cost, there seems to be a very close relationship with the assurer in terms of this customization aspect. And I kind of feel that if you're customizing this infrastructure for a specific assurer, then there may be some independence implications there in terms of the involvement, how deeply involved is the assurer in getting into this initial setup process. And then again, if there is this specialization occurring, this reduces the likelihood of the rotation of the assurers, and I don't know if that might be foreseen as an issue. You're kind of locked in with this one assurer. And then along with that, if there's customization, then it would benefit the assurer in terms of less costs needing to be spent on their end when they go in to perform the engagement. So perhaps there's certain fee discounting going on, and maybe this is going to provide some other biases in terms of the engagements. I didn't know if anyone had any further thoughts on the independence concerns related to.
I think these are actually very thoughtful points. This question of building a system and being tied up to a certain way of doing things and a certain servicer, which is the auditor, I think is a very thoughtful type of thing. I think my AIS PhD students here, when they heard this, they must have been thinking about ERPs. When you buy an ERP and spend $100 million installing it, you are stuck with that client, with a supplier for a long period of time. And the other thing is that the work we did in continuous auditing always was for internal audit organizations, mainly. And because a company like Procter & Gamble or Itaú can spend that money, but when you go to the middle tier of firms or the smaller firms, not that they won't benefit of a continuous, as you call very well attention, that this is really continuous monitoring with some bells and whistles on top of it. They really don't have the money to develop these things. On the other hand, if they go and pick up an ACL system, these two don't exist, but one of these days they'll exist, they're going to have to pay a big fixed cost. And ties them to a way of doing things. Now, we have I would rather have a discussion here, so maybe I'll just give 5 minutes to discussion. I want to do a couple more things before we finish.